Today, night means lamps, locks, and phone screens. For ancient humans, night meant something much more serious. The moment the sun went down, the rules changed. Ancient night was not empty. It was full of movement, cold air, hidden eyes, and things you could hear but not see. When vision failed, hearing took over. A crack in the brush was no longer background noise. It was information. And once the shadows started moving, imagination did the rest. Night was not only scary. It was cold, uncomfortable, and physically dangerous. That is why the group mattered so much. In the dark, safety was rarely an individual project. The fire was small, but psychologically it was huge. It drew a line between us and whatever was out there. Once everyone gathered around that light, the night changed again. It became a stage. Ancient humans did not just enter the night. They had to negotiate with it. Darkness did not simply remove light. It changed what the world was. A path that looked obvious at noon could become a trap at night. Distance became harder to judge, faces harder to read, and shadows much too confident. The same forest that gave food during the day could become a wall of noises after sunset. Foragers had to think about timing, because being far from camp after dark was a terrible scheduling decision. Without artificial light, the edge of the fire became the edge of certainty. Beyond that circle, the brain started filling in the blanks, often with teeth. That fear was not stupidity. It was useful caution wearing a dramatic costume. Night forced humans to plan, return, listen, remember paths, and stay close. In other words, darkness turned ordinary survival into a team sport with worse visibility. Then humans found the greatest night tool of all, fire. It gave light, heat, and a tiny zone where the world made sense. Fire did not erase danger, but it could push danger farther away. But fire was not magic. It needed fuel, attention, and someone who did not fall asleep at the worst possible time. To modern people, fire is atmosphere. To ancient people, it was infrastructure with sparks. Around the flame, hands could keep working, faces could be read, and fear could be shared instead of carried alone. Fire also made the night socially louder, because everyone had opinions near the warm spot. Of course, fire also created shadows, which means it solved one problem and invented a theatrical one. Still, fire changed the equation. Darkness was no longer total. The night did not disappear, but humans had a glowing tool for arguing with it. The night was not just mysterious. For ancient humans, it could also be occupied. Humans were clever, but they were not exactly the official champions of night vision. A twig crack, a wing beat, a breath, a gust of wind. Every sound demanded interpretation. The hardest question was simple: ignore it, or wake everyone up. False alarms were annoying. But in a dangerous world, no alarm could be worse. Fire, voices, and group movement could discourage some animals. But fire was not a force field. Fear has a useful flaw. It would rather mistake a branch for a beast than the other way around. Fear also spread attention. One person heard something, and suddenly the whole group had ears. Some nights, one person probably woke the whole cave because a bush had opinions. So fear was not just panic. At night, fear could become a group alarm system. Around the fire, ancient humans did something powerful. They stayed together. The circle of light turned many frightened bodies into one watchful group. People could share warmth, food, tools, and information without wandering into the dark. A child could sleep because adults were awake enough to notice trouble. A watcher could relax a little because the group was behind them. Firelight made faces readable, and readable faces are social technology. You could see who was calm, scared, angry, tired, or clearly pretending to know what that noise was. The night compressed people into conversation, teaching, gossip, and small arguments. Survival was not only muscles. It was memory, timing, roles, trust, and not wandering off like an idiot. The group around the fire was not just surviving the night. It was quietly inventing culture. Once fire pulled people together, the dark became the perfect screen for stories. A moving shadow could become an animal, a warning, a memory, or just your cousin being dramatic. Stories could teach where not to walk, which sounds mattered, and why the dark deserved respect. When you cannot see the cause, the mind often builds a character. That does not mean every story was foolish. Stories organized danger, memory, and meaning. A shadow beast was easier to remember than a lecture about risk management. Around the fire, fear became plot. Modern people binge shows. Ancient people had one fire, infinite darkness, and a terrifying sound design department. Stories helped the group share the same warnings, the same memories, and the same version of what the night meant. Night did not only make humans afraid, it made them imagine together. Eventually, even the bravest group had a problem. People get tired. Sleeping in the ancient night was not like closing a bedroom door and trusting the thermostat. Some people may have slept while others stayed more alert, because full unconsciousness is a bold strategy when the bushes are making noises. Fire helped, but embers faded, and a fading fire changed the mood fast. Cold also made sleep a negotiation, not a guarantee. Humans may have rested in chunks, shifting between sleep, waking, listening, and checking the fire. A watchful night was not a modern security shift. It was more like, please notice the weird sound before it becomes everyone's problem. The group had to balance rest with vigilance, warmth with fuel, fear with exhaustion. And every successful night ended with the same ancient miracle. Everyone was still there at dawn. So sleep was not an escape from the night. It was a team strategy inside it. By dawn, night had done more than scare humans. It had trained them. It trained them to gather, listen, remember, and care who was missing from the fire. It made fire more than a tool. It made fire a center. It made stories useful because fear needed shape and memory needed delivery. It made cooperation feel obvious because alone in the dark is a terrible ancient business plan. Over countless nights, humans practiced attention, planning, teaching, trust, and imagination. So when we ask what happened when ancient humans faced the night, the answer is not just fear. They built circles of light, systems of care, and meanings big enough to survive until morning. Modern night hides behind switches and screens, but ancient night was a teacher with terrible lighting. Final answer: humans did not conquer the night. They became human by facing it together.